Ontario. That's so cool. Someone hasn't received their message. Did most of the messages come out okay? I sort of did a second one today as well, hoping that everyone would get the messages. Got to log in on another one. Isn't it fun watching people doing their now copy. Actually, I'm not sure whether it will allow me. You know, sometimes they don't allow you to send things through after the starting time. Okay. Oh, yep. Here comes another. Oh, there she is. Good. And her. Beautiful. Lovely. Hi, Eve, Deb, Sharon. Yeah, you did it. Well done. 7 p.m. Yeah, getting that kinesiology brain up and running. You know, I know last year, actually 2018, I took 7 weeks off, and I had that thought somewhere in there that I would forget what I was doing after all that time. No. Yeah. In fact, that one I shared in the Awesome Energy Healers a couple of days ago, that was that guy, the Irish guy, Fergal. And yeah, because we'd been out the back of somewhere. We were on Lake Titicaca, which always reminds me of Groundhog Day. And yeah, we all injured our shoulders because, you know, not as young as we used to be, playing volleyball, and he'd really done his shoulders in. So I thought, let's do some kinesi video, whack it on YouTube. Okay, yeah, right, Mark, you want to get switched on. It is interesting, the whole switching thing. Someone who may or may not be here tonight, I'm sort of hoping she'll make it. Part of her kinesiology journey has been really feeling like she just doesn't stay switched on. So, you know, and then she muscle tests the clients. And I was chatting to one of my friends recently, and we were deciding that, you know, part of it's our belief, of course, you know, with what do we believe the energy around us is doing it? How switched on do we feel in the world? How grounded do we feel? How energetic, how many vampires there are around us? How many energy vampires there are around us? Yeah, Sean's about 1 kilometre away from here. Drew found me on radio many years ago. Amanda, yay, Toowoomba. Is it getting cooler up there, Amanda? Or are we still having those really hot days?
Yeah, no, it is. It's just starting to cool off now in the last day or so.
Yep.
Next week it should be good. We'll be good. Yes.
Oh, Northern Ireland, 9 a.m.
Port Macquarie. I used to be from there. Nice.
Sydney, Burpengary. Oh, hey, Vicky. Yay. We do actually have some amazing healers in this group, which is really fantastic. So hopefully everyone will get lots out of this week.
Stop. There we go.
What's that, Vicky?
That was my reminder to tell me to get on.
Oh, there. Yep, good. Last minute. Hey, Sandra, how are you this evening? We did it. That was a bunch of messages today. Thought she was booked in and they're not. Beautiful. Good. Laidley. Hey, Judy. Judy. Makes me want to sing, you know, Beatles.
Please don't.
Judy. Please don't. And Karen, is that Karen or Karen? Nothing worse than calling people the wrong name. Beautiful.
Madonna, I'm just going to come in on another device because it's one of those days where everything's flat and I don't want to drop out and annoy you halfway through your course. So I'm just going to be on, just if you see me come in again.
No worries.
It's me twice. Yeah, cheers.
Cool.
Madonna, is my video actually working? It says it is, but there's nothing on my logo.
Who's saying that?
Judy Maycock.
No, you are a little blank screen,
Says it's
darling.
on. All right, I shall try some more settings.
Interesting. They are funny, aren't they? You know, it's sort of been my coach Angela, she's in a hot spot, and when her computer gets too hot, she actually puts ice packs in underneath them to keep her little computer working better, which is very amusing. There's Amanda again. Very good. Okay. Well, I will keep an eye on people coming in. So I've got a couple of screens going on here. And I assume no one else can see if there's anyone waiting to come in. I assume you guys can't see that back end at all. Okay, cool.
You can make someone co-host if you need to, Madonna, and they can do that for you.
How do I do that?
Go into participants and then right click on someone's name and do co-host. I can offer, it's a little bit hectic here, unless there's someone else that knows what they're doing. You're welcome to put me down.
Yeah, that right click isn't sort of working. Nothing's going on there. That's okay. That's okay.
Cool.
I'll just, I seem to have, I hope that isn't a problem. Oh yeah, okay, good. Okay, so thank you. What I was really delighted, surprised, and honored that so many people chose to be part of this week. It just feels like something I've been thinking about for so long, and the world in the last few years has made me realize, of course, that we need more healing on the planet. We need more love, we need more connection, we need more ability by people to get out there and really help people and do the work I don't know if show of hands, does anyone feel like they were here on the planet to do healing for other people? Like, is that someone? Yeah, because it's one of these things that I was very, very surprised when I got into natural therapies, probably as much as my hubby, my mum, everyone, because I've been reflecting about how I got here. And some people have got chronic illness, so they're drawn to natural therapies or chiropractic or osteopathy because that's their goal. Some people are third generation healers. They've seen it in their families forever and they simply don't have another path that makes sense to them. It's the only thing they've ever known. My mum was a politician. My dad was an accountant. I had an aunt who was a kindy teacher, but she was also into all sorts of natural therapies and happiness, and was always sending us, you know, fun stuff for our birthdays, which was always to do with health. I had another crazy aunt whose two things were she was a vegetarian and she loves enemas. So they're her two favorite things. So the people who were very much into health in my family were the crazy ones. And I've got a huge family. So the rest of everyone were either, well, no one was. It was just one of those things. My brother started med school when I was in about grade 10. So I also have a brother who's a doctor, a cousin who's an anesthetist. And these days I have found that more than anything, I feel sorry for doctors on the planet at the moment. I just sort of feel like they are really hamstrung with what they're allowed to say, with what they're allowed to do. Here in Queensland particularly, and I think Victoria, Australia is just as bad. We have just passed laws here in Australia where doctors can get 3 years jail and $30,000 fine if they say things against what our chief health officers say.
I think the mental health system is the same, Madonna.
Yeah.
I think it's got huge issues.
To me, it's a scary time to be on a planet, but it's also a really fabulous time. Hi, Eve. So it's a real challenge. You know, when I was growing up in a small town, I had never met anyone with a natural bent of anything. You know, I was the featherhead in the family, and it was made abundantly clear that I would never amount to anything. And having a teenager in a small country town, teenage baby, didn't actually help me much along those lines. But by the time my kids were little, when they were 1 and 5, I decided I was going to be either a fashion designer or an accountant. And then my mum got a rash from head to toe. So we moved 2,000 kilometres north to Cooktown in Queensland. and my mum got a rash from head to toe. In hindsight, this will be no surprise to most people, it was emotional. But all the doctors wanted to do was steroids. They wanted to do heavy duty anti-inflammatories. One of my crazy aunts, the one who likes enemas, she sent me a book by Paavo Airola, How to Get Well. Has anyone ever read that book? I read it in like 2 or 3 days, and I'm talking 32 years ago. But I read it from beginning to end. I had never heard anything like it in my life. So at that stage, I think I had met one man who was studying natural therapies at the time. And other than that, I was just a fish out of water. Nothing really made sense in the normal world. I was always that med girl. If I went to the doctors, I wanted a prescription, I wanted a diagnosis, and I was always annoyed. Actually, I was disappointed when I was like 18 that I didn't get glasses prescription. So it's amazing what makes our brains tick, because I don't know whether that was a normal thing. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to get a diagnosis. I was so excited when I got glandular fever when I was in grade 10, because it actually had a name. And when my kids were little, when they were 1 and 5, I was always at the doctor's, quick as a flash when anything went wrong. I was the usual mum. And poor old Josh, when he was 2, he had some nasty, nasty infection. So I was one of those mums who was following the guidelines on the little bottles to the letter. So it was 5 mils of Tixi-Lex, 5 mils of Panadol, and a third one. So I gave him the full maximum dose of each one of them, and he slept like a log. Didn't even think about what I was doing to his poor little liver at the time. And, it's in my world, the healthy in our house would have been the occasional brown bread, but because we all complained about it, we just didn't get there. So my uncle Sess gave me the Clan of the Cave Bear books when I was about 21. Yeah. So in that, the woman Isa was a herbal medicine woman, and that made me start looking at the world around me in a different light. I actually have a cousin whose daughter is named Ayla, straight out of that book. So when I met her, I went, have you read the Clan of the Cave Bear books? And sure enough, she had. So when hubby and I moved up to Cooktown in about 30 years ago, we were looking for something for me to study. My mum got this rash from head to toe. I read the book Paavo Airola, and 3 weeks later, I was booked into a naturopathy course. So I'd literally had the brochures for fashion design and accounting there, and they just stayed on the shelf. And I was complaining about money, actually. And next thing, I had spent way, way, way more than that on something that I obviously felt a passion about. So it's interesting, isn't it, when you get a passion for something, all of a sudden the money doesn't matter so much. About 2 years into my naturopathy, my hubby said, oh, well, when we get home to Brisbane, we'll have to set up your clinic. What do you need? And I said, what do you mean set up a clinic? I couldn't charge for this. And I remember the day I said that, and he said, well, what the hell have you been doing for this 2 years? Anyway, it's sort of, I don't know, maybe I was a bit of a featherhead, because it just hadn't occurred to me. I was just learning it and loving it and enjoying it. And when I moved back to Cooktown, so by that stage, I started psyching myself up for charging people. But kinesiology came into my life. When we moved back to Brisbane, I had to set up and I had to do a first aid course. And my sister and I, we both had to do it, her for teaching, me for naturopathy. So we were sitting in the back row like a couple of naughty little kids, and my now friend, Linda Hoggard, was sitting in the front row. I didn't know her from a bar of soap at the time, but she was very much along the lines of asking very sensible questions. And I said to my friend Linda, to my sister Carmel, I said, that woman's either a physio or a massage therapist. She's really intelligent. And my darling sister, who loves me so much, said, you can't make friends. You should go and introduce yourself. So we started swapping massage week in, week out. And the fantastic thing about that was after about 6 weeks, her back totally changed. Does anyone here do massage? Yep. So it was such an interesting difference, sort of like 1 week, because Linda's like sort of thin on the top, and then she's hippie, so that's the sort of shape. So the top down to her waist is really stringy with the muscles, the ligaments, the tendons. And then one day it just didn't feel like that. And I was sort of like, what did you do? And she said, I had an hour of kinesiology. So of course I said, what's that? And next thing I think it might have been 6 weeks later, we were both booked into a kinesiology course. So I started naturopathy without ever having met a naturopath. I was doing massage for a year before I'd ever had a massage. And I started studying kinesiology before I had ever had a kinesiology session. So I'm just one of those people. I'm not sure whether that's a flaw or a blessing, but I tend to think it's a bit of a, I definitely like to know if there's something out there that can help people and that I can certainly move forward with. So that's sort of what got me into my journey of kinesiology. And also probably the best thing about Linda is that she was quite neurologically screwed up. So her left and right didn't work. She had really bad depth of field. So from that perspective, she went and did the research as to where we were going to go with kinesiology, which is why we went down the brain integration stuff. It's why we do the structural stuff. Oh, she also had a crap immune system. So it really made us look at the immune system and everything you can do along those lines. So that's sort of why I've got such a unique combination of things that I do. And so that's also because of my naturopathy. I'm so lucky that I did my naturopathy first, because I just don't know if I would have ever done naturopathy if I'd done kinesiology first. I just don't know. So yeah, so it's been a long journey. It's been about a 32-year journey. Kinesiology, maybe 27 years, but I absolutely love it.
If you didn't do the naturopathy, Madonna, is it because you don't use a lot of it, or is there anything that you just found you never ended up using? Is that what you mean by?
No, not at all. Not at all. Just because kinesiology is so much fun. For me, kinesiology for me is purely fun. So it doesn't matter what I'm testing. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing infections or toxins or whether I'm trying to structurally balance someone from head to toe. You know, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I just love everything about the kinesiology. It's fun. And I think that's what disappointed me with kinesiology as well. About, say 20 years ago, I was doing some training in heart healing. And there were some particular people up the coast who were doing training, and they had a very specific, at that point, I didn't know anyone who had done a structured kinesiology course because it just didn't exist up here in Queensland. So people around, certainly down in Victoria, Australia, they would actually do a structured diploma, but they didn't exist here in Queensland. So I went to America, I went to Perth, I went down to Victoria, I went all over the place to learn, because I'd be looking for the courses and we'd just go for the courses. So Linda and I had a ball for 10 years, going wherever we needed to go to learn what we needed to learn.
That's how a lot of people learn. I think some people I know that learned a long time ago, they just did that as well because they didn't really have the diplomas around.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And with kinesiology, you know, a lot of it's about our confidence. So when you are getting different, you've got to get different people on the table. You've got to work on different people. If you're only working on one person all the time, you get a really limited view of how people's bodies work. So one of my clients, she is a really soft touch. So it doesn't matter what I do, her body will just collapse and she'll immediately say, what was that you were testing? So then I'll tell her, because she is, whereas other people, you know, you can imagine some people, their arm will straighten, their fist will clench, you know, so I have to get it. That's a whole, even though I tell them to relax and stuff, but that's a hard thing to get people used to when they're not used to it. So it's sort of interesting. You do have to get used to different feelings. My hubby, for the first year I was doing kinesiology training, my teacher was Gordon Dixon. I could not muscle test Jason. So people can be over facilitated. So muscles can be underworking and overworking. So any muscle that is working overtime all the time, it's a hyper facilitated muscle. So a hyper facilitated muscle will make us as the practitioners feel like we're doing something wrong, because all muscles should lock and unlock if you give them the correct energy. But if a muscle is in, actually there's first, second and third stage stress. Have you heard that sort of concept? Okay. I love my first, second, third stage stress. So it's sort of like, actually, is that going to work? No, maybe that's not going to work. You can't see that, can you? Let me see if I can make it bigger for a sec. Okay, so let me, nope, that's not working. Okay, Manda, what have I done wrong?
What about,
What sort of view do I need there to make me big?
are you trying to make you be, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So you want to go into, up the top, has it got view?
Yeah,
And speaker?
yes, it's ticked, but I'm little. Okay. Am I little to everyone else or am I small to everyone else?
Hang on.
How
You're
do I
big,
look?
you're big to me. When I put you on speaker, we've all got our own settings. So I had you on gallery, but now I've got you on
Oh,
speaker.
right.
And then you're big. Yeah.
Ah, computers, don't you love them?
So Madonna, have you got the facility to use whiteboard down on the bottom? On the bottom run, you've got participants, share screen, record, reactions, apps, and whiteboards.
I do.
Okay, so has anyone used a whiteboard? I know I've been in programs where other people have used them. I haven't used them myself. So do you just open it up and then writing on?
Can anyone see that?
Yep, loading.
Got it.
Yes, loading.
Okay. So, what? Okay. I haven't used this before, so bear with me. So if you imagine that this horizontal line, oh gosh, my thing's in a weird position. My horizontal line is equilibrium. That's homeostasis. First level of stress is when we have a bad day or a bad moment or something. Oops, oh my God, I don't know how I did that, but it's when we have a bit of a moment and then we sleep and then we feel okay again. Or we have a bad moment and we take some neurocalm or some nervocalm or some kava or something and we feel okay again. So that's first level of stress. Second layer of stress is up here. And that's when we're hyper-facilitated all the time. This is hypo-facilitated, so it's underactive. This is hyper-facilitated when we are overactive. Why is that moving? I don't know what I'm doing to make that happen. Sorry about that. And third stage stress is when we're down here below the line and we are in basically chronic fatigue of the muscles. So we keep trying to jump back up to equilibrium, but it just doesn't work. So first, second, and third layers of stress, I use them constantly in kinesiology, whether or not I am doing it. You can use it with emotions, you can use it with phrases, you can use it with muscles, you can use it with beliefs, you can use it with anything within kinesiology. Once you realize this first, second, and third layer of stress, for a start, it means that it gives you some context for if you're muscle testing someone and you're getting a hyper facilitation, so they're over facilitated, they're locking and nothing you do is unlocking them, that's second stage stress. And it's good to have a word for that rather than thinking that as the human being, we're switching and doing something wrong. Because that's often what people think when they're starting out with kinesiology or they're trying to get their confidence back with kinesiology, is that they're doing something wrong and they're switching, which it often really isn't. And even when we're muscle testing up for supplements and things like that, you know, if the body wants, if it's hypo-facilitated, so it's underactive, it might say yes to absolutely everything. And you think, well, I can't take everything because the body's going, give me anything to make me feel better. So when we're looking at first, second, and third layers of stress, which, like I say, they're some of my favorite tools, imagine the people in your life when they're, by the end of the day, they just sit down and collapse. They could be in first or third stage stress. Does anyone get a heavy head by the end of the day? you get to the end of the day and you just want to sit back on your lounge and just relax your head because it's so tired. That can be first, second, that can be like a really exhausted first or third layer of stress because the muscles just don't have the oomph to hold yourself up by the end of the day. Actually, Sean is a chiropractor. Sure, he has a theory about evolution and that. And so it's interesting hearing it from other perspectives around different modalities as well. But yeah, so with first, second and third stage stress in relation to muscle testing, we always want to make sure that when we're testing anything, we've got a lock and an unlock. And even if you go back to, so there's lots of, let's have a think for a sec. Can anyone here self-muscle test? Yep. Yep. So, okay, so Angela and Shelley.
I can as well, Madonna. Sorry, I just had to turn my mic on.
Yep, cool. So have there been times when you have been questioning your muscle testing? Yeah.
Yes.
And can you verbalize why you test it, why you double guess it?
Feels waffly.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like it's not a dead set unlock and it's not a dead set lock.
Yeah, okay.
It's not clean.
Okay.
For me, it's more just the result. Like if sometimes I really only use it for sort of diagnosing, like if I've got symptoms, if it's, you know, I try to work out what it is. Like, is it a virus? Is it just and the last time I did that, it ended up being wrong because I kept asking if I had COVID and I wasn't getting anything. And it turned out I did have COVID. So I was like, oh, this is the first time it didn't work. And then I thought, well, maybe the COVID's just buggered up my muscles, my accuracy. I don't know, but I don't usually use it. But I have found in the past that it's tended to be quite accurate when I've just for that basic sort of stuff. But this time it wasn't. So yeah, that's when I get a bit doubtful. It's like,
yeah. Angela?
Yeah, it's similar, mixed messages. So, you know, it'll be this on one day and we're testing against the same thing and it'll be different the next day. And then it might give me 5 products to take, or it might give me how many products to take. So, yeah, it's get myself zipped back up again.
Yes. Shelley?
I think
Oh, sorry, hon.
Yeah, that's how I am. It's some days it'll be okay and then other days it won't be. Or sometimes I think your head will get in to whatever you're testing. So if it's like, do I have like something like COVID? Sometimes that won't, just for myself.
Yeah.
Testing on myself.
I go back to what you taught me in the beginning, Madonna. Ask a better question.
Yeah. What am I
yeah.
actually asking, and what is the context of the question? And I find that that's one of the things with kinesiology. It's like an algebraic equation.
Yeah.
So whatever question you have, you need an answer for it. And like Angela, you know, it might depend on how exhausted you are on the day and what moment you are muscle testing up, and your body might go, crap, I'm really buggered. I need 5 things this morning. You know, so sometimes it really can be that. My friend Linda, my neurologically challenged friend, she's not so much these days, by the way, but she did have her genes done at one stage. And when they were testing her, you know, they did that. It was the Dutch test. So it's a whole bunch of inflammatory pathways and immune pathways and detoxification pathways, I think. Anyway, the guy was walking behind her and he looked at her scores and said, oh my God, whatever you're taking, double it, because there was no good pathways working from her genetic perspective. So she got overseas. So when she was traveling overseas, she used to be hammered. She'd always make sure she left 48 hours early because she knew that she would just be wiped out. So when she started taking Brock shots, so broccoli seed extract, she started to take quite big doses, and she found that if she took about the equivalent of 20 capsules when she arrived somewhere, she would totally wipe out the jet lag because her genes were so affected by the inflammation flying and the radiation that she just had to quench that radiation and the inflammation as soon as she got there, and then she was fine. She was actually fine. So it's amazing what we can use, and she didn't trust it initially because she'd never experienced actually. So anyway, after that, she used to take along, you know, a whole bag full of those little guys, and everywhere she'd go, she would muscle test things up. So it's sort of a cool tool when you start using it for muscle testing. So with muscle testing, and like Judy, like you said, I have always used this particular one for self-muscle testing. And the reason I use that one is because that is my strongest combination of fingers. And because I have 2 doctors in my family, I like to make sure I have an absolute lock that's not moving and an absolute unlock. So lock and unlock. So that's why I use that one. A lot of people use this one. I can't make it work for me. So that's one that a lot of people say, I am Madonna, I am, you know, James, I am Madonna, I am Judy, I am Madonna, I am Shelley. So, you know, it works, but I don't feel comfortable with that because I feel for me that it's a bit too, no, actually it does work for me. I just don't like it as much. I think my skeptical brain needs my 100% lock, my 100% unlock. And because I get so sore afterwards, I know it works for me because I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to be 100% accurate with that one.
I just use my deltoid on my arm as if I'm.
Oh, do you? Yep.
So I can do it standing up, and then either my arm goes down or it doesn't. I just found it was easier because I find the finger ones too hard.
Yeah.
I prefer to use a bigger muscle than but everyone's different. It's just I've never mastered the finger ones. So
yeah, no, and I actually do love you doing that, but I find this one you can hide it underneath a desk. Occasionally I'll have a skeptical client here who doesn't want me to use muscle testing, but I feel like a fraud. So then I sit under the table muscle testing to make sure I actually.
Whereas I'll just be the chemist and I'll just pull my arm out and be like, oh, yep, I'll take that one. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But anyway.
Does anyone use this little one as a self-muscle tester? I'm not doing, oh, you do, Shelley. Yeah, I can't make that one work at all. Once again, I'm pretending that works. But it's sort of, it's basically using those little muscles in there, give it a lock, give it an unlock.
Yeah.
But so once again, Linda will be here on Thursday. I'll probably get her to have a chat to everyone. She's got amazing experience as well. Which one do you use, Angela? Oh, yeah. Ah, right. Huh.
So I think I might have given myself arthritis in my testing finger for doing it for 25 years.
Yes.
But
yeah, and it's funny because that's what I sort of find when I do my etheric balances. And by the end of it, and if I'm, you know, so I'm on my own, I'm working on an etheric body. And because I'm doing all this, like it's quite hard, you know, for an hour on the forearm, the fingers, you know, afterwards I have to rub a lot of, you know, delights into my fingers to get the energy moving again. So self-muscle testing, like Judy said, it comes down to the question. What is the question we're asking? Because if you don't have context for your question, it's going to be a waffly answer. So because self-muscle testing is usually about something specific that we want it to be about, like, and supplements is an easy thing. But someone said in the chat, sorry, about the emotions. Yeah, getting the same emotions over and over and over again. Yeah. Well, and that there is a lot of that going on. Well, when I run my bioresonance, the same emotions show up for me over and over again. There's things like, you know, political conflict and things like that. So it's funny, the stuff that does show up over and over again, because emotions are about a frequency. And our brain, you know, they say that our brain is like a computer, except it's programmed by a 2-year-old. So we don't actually have much logic going on in our brain until we're 2 years old. So until then, we're really running on primitive reflexes. So the primitive reflex energy of the Moro reflex of those, you know, they're the things that are designed to keep us alive until we're about 2 years old. So when we're doing kinesiology, we've got to have other tools up our sleeves as well for people, like if we're going to the brain and doing some stuff and trying to work out where the logic is, and when it's under 2 years old, it's not going to be there because it's not there. Kids aren't logical at 2 years old. So that's a really, by the time you start to go, oh, okay, they're at this age, that's probably a jam primitive reflex. So whoever has a temper tantrum and then you go, man, I was so 14-year-old in that primitive reflex. It's funny. And I think someone was commenting on the Karens, you know, who are out there having these little hissy fits online. And you sort of watch them and you go, is that a adult response to something when we're having these full-blown temper tantrums in public? Have you seen that where they're not acting like in their full conscious adult brains? There's not a logical, creative connection going on.
Kind of terrifying.
It is a little terrifying. And I
And
know
for
that
an
when I
adult
do it,
acting like a 5-year-old.
yeah, exactly. And you can imagine all the things that happen in our early life that really start to create the way that our brain is forming. I remember I had a kinesiology session about 10 years ago, and the lady I was having at the time, yeah, the inner child, that's exactly right, inner child running the show. I remember she made some comment to me about my dad. So it was around the time when my dad died when I was like 20. He was 44 years old. And that wasn't the issue. But I remember when I was in school, grade 1, I was 4.5 years old. And my best friend was Bonnie Ryan. And her and I were the only 2 people in the class who were the daughters of alcoholics. And somehow in that 30 kids in the class, we're the 2 that found each other. Now, how does that happen? What are we releasing out there to the world that happened for our little brains? And it was interesting because during that kinesiology session, this woman said to me about Dad, and I said, no, Dad wasn't abusive or anything. She said, yeah, but the alcohol. And I said, no, but he was a happy drunk. He was fine. And I was so defensive of my dad because I had a best friend whose dad was someone who would throw irons, or was someone who would throw bricks, or was someone who would throw microwaves. And you go, wow. So, but she said that my brain was saying I was traumatized, simply the fact that I had an alcoholic father, and I had never seen having an alcoholic parent as being a trauma before. And there I was at like 45 years old, and I learned for the first time that it was a trauma to my brain having a dad who was an alcoholic because he was a fun drunk. So even though consciously, the brain was saying, no, everything's okay, my unconscious brain had really stored that in. It had locked that in there as a pattern. That was part of the reason why I would get anxiety and drink too much, or I would get and I wouldn't sleep, but I wouldn't put it down to anything because I didn't have any particular thoughts. When we're running in survival stuff, there's no particular memories associated when we're running in survival in the rear of the brain. There is in the subconscious brain. The subconscious brain has got somewhere between 60 and 100,000 thoughts a day we have. So that stuff is easier to access. You know, I am not worthy. I am not, it's all of those things. I am good enough. I am worthy. I deserve the best. You know, those sort of little things that you say it consciously, but if you muscle test it, all sorts of things start coming through. And with the psychological reversal stuff, that's where your brain starts doing the exact opposite of what you think it's got to do. So you say, in relation to releasing an old pattern, and your brain goes, I need to keep this pattern. And when it's there over and over again, like Anna mentioned earlier on, you know, that little brain, like that little 4-year-old brain, for whatever reason, has grabbed onto that and hasn't been able to let it go because there's a safety mechanism. And this is the thing I love about kinesiology. Everything our brains do all day, every day, is about safety. It's about survival, even if we don't recognize it. So when our brains are even, and the classic one is anger. Like, what's happening when we're angry? How does your body feel? How do you move out there in the world? You're less likely to get hurt because everyone's going to go, holy crap, not going to go over there. So you're creating that boundary. You're creating that energy around you that's going to stop people from hurting you. If you're fearful and anxious, what does that do to the people around you? Like, being fearful and anxious, it's also protective because your body is looking for the next thing to go wrong. So when we're anxious, our poor little brain's going, I know there's a tiger in the room, but I know it's around the corner as well. So that family of tigers that is in our bodies, in our room, around the corner, they're just there all the time with fear and anxiety. And it's a bit of a tough world to live in at the moment with all sorts of shenanigans going on. And the best thing we can do is keep rebalancing ourselves every day. And naturopathically, detox, detox, detox. It's a fun time on the planet at the moment. Who feels like they were meant to be here on the planet at this moment in time? Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be a very interesting 10 years ahead of us, I think, with everything that's been, like even just the fact that our little children on the planet have lost IQ points in the last 3 years because of all the masks and the homeschooling. They've shown that now. So there's going to be a lot of kids who need extra support with learning and connection. And we've got our little autism, going through the roof. So we need to have some tools that are easy, that are okay to work with people and really help to move people out of this fight and flight that they're going to be going through. So who here has used the old emotional stress release points? Shelley?
Often.
Jen? Yeah. Judy? Yeah. Yeah, so those little guys there, for those of you who don't know, they're halfway between the eyebrows and the hairline, above the eyes. And anytime you're pulsing in the body, you use 2 fingers or a thumb, because that's neutral polarity. So, and you can put just your hand on there as well. But what we're doing when we're putting our fingers on those emotional stress release points, there's a few things. For a start, that also relates to stomach energy. So those are neurolymphatic points for the stomach. How many people get stressed and then they get sick in their gut? It sort of happens very quickly. The phone rings, you get bad news and you go, oh my goodness. It is such an automatic thing to do, to put our hands on our forehead when we need more brain. Because what happens is that brings the blood away from the rear of the brain. This is survival back here. How many people get that neck pain in the lower, that neck and the lower skull? That is when your body is usually in survival. So by popping the hand on the front of the forehead or holding these little emotional stress release points, we're actually bringing blood to the frontal cortex. On the left is the logical side of the brain. On the right is the emotional gestalt, big picture side of the brain. So we're bringing blood to the frontal cortex, which is allowing better blood supplies for big thinking so that you can come up with a logical, creative solution for something. So anytime you're feeling stressed, you can pop your head there. Another one in another discipline is sort of hand on the rear of the skull as well. Now, when you're doing that little combination, you're actually increasing the number of neurons from the front to the back of the brain because you're putting blood supply in both of those areas.
I wonder, Madonna, if it would be helpful for them to have some kind of a headband that kids could wear, through the day when they're feeling stressed. Does that sort of thing exist where, it's sort of got like some kind of fabric or something that stimulates those points and they could just wear it on their head?
Yeah, right. I wonder if it's
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure. That would be very cool.
Madonna,
I
which
think you
discipline
can use
uses that for
crystal.
trauma?
For trauma?
Yeah, I remember learning it with you, but I can't remember where from. Where when there's
Well,
like a PTSD trauma, and especially
yes.
children, you use the back and the front, like you hold hand gently
Might
until
have
you
been
get the peace.
biokinetics, Judy.
True.
Yeah. Because I know there were a whole bunch of psychoneural points in there, and there
Very
was a
effective.
bunch of them, you know, at the rear of the skull in biokinetics. Yeah.
We had a friend that had trauma to his hands unloading a winch at the rubbish dump, and he was startling in his sleep, and it was like so effective. He was gobsmacked. It was minutes, and the PTSD just melted.
Beautiful.
It was beautiful. So very powerful.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I noticed that structural stuff was so connected to something as simple as that. I was doing counseling kinesiology with Gordon Dixon, I don't know, 25 years ago. And there was a lady lying on the table, and all Gordon was doing while she was telling her story, which was a traumatic story, I can't remember what it was, but he was holding her emotional stress release points. And when she was lying on her back, and you can imagine, just say these are the feet. So I don't know if you've seen it in my kinesiology, but when you pull the feet into the center, they're supposed to be about even, you know, lying on the back. Can you visualize what I'm doing? So if one side is tighter than the other, it's sort of, they don't come in at the same rate, which indicates that this side has more pelvic tightness. So therefore they don't come in as much. Now, while this lady was lying on the table, and it was like, it would have been an hour-long session, but her legs were moving in, they were coming back up, they were moving out. Like the feet didn't stop moving the whole time, which to me was like, oh my goodness. Like, and my friend Linda was probably there, so I would have said something to her about it. But afterwards, it made me go and check her with the structural stuff, because it was interesting. This didn't fix the structural stuff, because you know how I said kinesiology is like an algebraic equation. What's on this side will match whatever balance we do once we get a lock, you know. So that's the aim. We get a trauma, we get an unlock, we do something, we want to come back and get a lock, you know. So we want an algebraic equation. So with her, he was doing this, she was telling her story, but because it wasn't part of the equation to actually sort out the structural stuff that was going on, that was all still there. So when Gordon finished his balance, I sort of said, do you mind if I go do something? And I went around and I stacked in the feet in relation to the trauma that she'd been chatting about. And then I went and did some NOT, and then I came back, and then it was all nice and balanced. So if it's not stored or stacked into the balance, you're not going to correct it. So a lot of people, like, just say I've done hours of kinesiology, it's quite funny. People go, oh, so do I have cancer? I'll say, well, I didn't check you for cancer. You didn't mention that at the beginning. So you can only do what people tell you about. And just because something hasn't muscle tested up in a kinesiology balance doesn't mean anything. It's worked on what you've been working on. Do you find that, Shelley, you know, that you're working on someone with something specific, and then they ask you some random question at the end about, have you ever found that?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I always find that
quite frankly, it's,
random.
yeah, because they've been there for the hour. And so
Yeah.
they, I guess they figured that we fixed everything, and the brain released whatever, or the muscles released whatever. I don't know. Yeah. And,
Yes.
and I get that one a lot. Do I have cancer? I didn't test for that. Didn't
Yes.
show up.
Yeah, I can get you back on the table for another few minutes and we can check that.
Correct.
So
Yep.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so it is sort of interesting, because as a pracky, we've got to also, when we, once again, it's all about context. Everything is about context. So if our context is simply to bring us back down into balance now, by the time you've got your pulsing, so what you're doing when you're holding this, by the way, you're waiting for the pulse to come to the frontal cortex. So by the time it's pulsing underneath your fingers on both sides evenly, that's a sign you've got the blood supply to the frontal cortex evenly. Can you see mine pulsing there, just by the way? Just that gentle little move. So when we have that pulse, we've shifted the energy, we've moved the energy. Now that's just asking for blood supply to the front of the brain. There's a little process in something called body talk. Has anyone heard of body talk? Yep. So I did a body talk course about, I don't know, once again, 25 to 30 years ago, and I didn't like the instructor, so I didn't go on and do any more. But one of the things that irritated me about anyway, she couldn't muscle test. But nonetheless, one of the things that they do in body talk, and that irritated me, I hate bad muscle testing. One of the things that she did teach, which was very handy, is using that heart-brain connection. So, and you don't need to be able to muscle test to do it, but it's like saying, okay, heart, okay, brain, this is what we're going to do. So if you are wanting to use, say, your emotional stress release in relation to something that's been irritating you or something that's been traumatic, or you can go, okay, so in relation to my 4-year-old trauma about my dad being an alcoholic, you can just say that because you're tapping it in. You're waking up your brain, you're waking up your heart, and then you wait for the pulse. And it might pulse straight away, but it might take a few more minutes because you've got something specifically that you've asked the body to do it in relation to. Or if you're stressed because you keep checking, oh man, do I have COVID? So okay, in relation to COVID, this will just help with the stress associated with COVID, but oh my God, what little rabbit holes is that going to go down into when we do the stress of COVID? Who has just cruised through the last few years without a single bit of stress about COVID? Well done. Well done.
I mostly did, which is why I was really surprised when I got it, because I hadn't even been around anyone that had symptoms, and I'd only been back in Sydney 1 week, and then I came down with this weirdest symptoms. And then it wasn't until I actually lost my taste and smell, which was 4 or 5 days into it, that I realized, oh, I think this, everyone else said, no, you've got COVID, because I was just, no, it wasn't showing up in my muscle testing. So I was convinced that it was just my usual body's cleansing something because it does that. Then no, I did have it and I had the cough straight away, but it was just weird because I'm like, oh, I've avoided it all this time. And then suddenly it was, so it was just weird. But anyway, no, I wasn't worried about it.
Nah, good stuff.
I happened to eventually get it, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things about, because I haven't had COVID and I've been treating a lot of people the other side of things, so more, because all the 5G stuff is up now. I'm wearing a lot more protection these days, because the 5G is such a bigger energy, and I've been listening to a lot of scientists about, 4G, 5G, EMFs, that sort of thing. I interviewed Arthur Furstenberg around Christmas time on my podcast. And once we start to realize how radiation affects our body, just about any symptom of anything can be connected to, just increases in radiation. So one of my ladies in today, her school, her place where she works, her place where she works, they've just put up these huge 5G towers. So where her little barber was, she started getting really unwell a little while ago because radiation can increase parasites in our body as well. So, same can the moon, so the moon can, so around full moon, parasites can release between 20 and 20,000 eggs a day, depending on the type of parasite. So if we're going to get out,
because of the gravity, or is it the effect on the water? Do we know?
No. It's because we're part of this human planet. The same way it affects our periods as women, it affects our hormones as humans. Parasites are in our little bodies and they're being affected by that as well.
Interesting.
It's a fertile time, shall we say. So if people want to get their bang for their buck with parasites, that's the time to do it. So I often recommend people, if they've got any parasite, supplements, taking it from a day before full moon to 4 or 5 days after the full moon. And just, because parasites are one of the few things that build up in our body for the rest of our lives. If we're not doing anything specifically to get rid of them, they just build up. And a lot of the, and I think that's why, this is why, well, we won't go down the COVID line, but basically it's very interesting that ivermectin helps people with COVID when it's an antiparasitic. So it's very, you go, right, what is this we're treating?
Well, I don't actually know that my body was recognizing what I was asking. That's why I think maybe my muscle testing wasn't, it's like it wasn't actually recognizing what I was asking, which is interesting. So it's like maybe my body just didn't understand what COVID was, because it's such a strange set of symptoms. It's not like a normal virus that I've had before.
Yes.
So, you know.
Okay, so so with the parasites, so I do it one day before the full moon and usually 5 to 6 days after the full moon. So a week all up. And it doesn't matter whether you take oregano, whether you take, Artemisia, whether you take there's liquid ones, there's herbal ones, whatever it says on the bottle, I'd probably take 1.5 times the dose of it. But it's, that's right. Yeah, one day before. Yeah. You'll be fine, Sandra. Yeah, it's not that hard, and there's some really nice ways of doing it that sort of help to look at them. It doesn't have to be an expensive regime to do.
Do you do it all through the full moon or just either side of it? The whole thing?
From the day before to 5 or 6 days afterwards. Yeah. And once again, you sort of think what I've been interviewing a few doctors lately, and I don't know whether you've heard the rumors the last few years that maybe viruses don't exist. So it's very interesting, because I had 2 doctors on my podcast a week apart, and both of them stopped me and said, Madonna, there's no such thing as viruses. And I go, So now when I'm muscle testing, I say viral particles, and viral particle like toxins. So I'm sort of changing my terminology as I get more knowledgeable, because it's been a very interesting 3 years. And I don't know whether they do or they don't, but it is very interesting. Like, you've heard the Rockefeller story from 1880. Have you heard that? So basically the Rockefellers were after something that they could blame all disease on, that they wanted to make doctors be able to say it but not be proven right or wrong. And they came up with the concept of viruses. So how often do you know people who go to the doctor and they say, oh, it must be a virus? Like, how often does that happen? Oh, yeah, migraines, a connection to migraines at full moons. So it is sort of interesting, because parasites, if they are starving, they can eat neurotransmitters. So basically, if your gut has, if it doesn't have the right nutrients for parasites, they can actually eat out things like serotonin, melatonin, things like that. So I can imagine that could contribute to migraines around a full moon, headaches and that sort of thing. Because if they, like, how bizarre is that they can actually gobble up our neurotransmitters as part of their energy.
That might be part of the reason why I found when I had too much candida that it was, well, I suspected that's what it was, but it would make me feel depressed. That was one of the symptoms, was just this feeling of, which was not normal, and it sort of cleared up after, like, I had some other symptoms, but I did wonder, I wonder why it is that I feel this depression feeling when there were, and maybe it was something to do with that.
Yeah. And with the immune system stuff that I do is sort of like, you can muscle test up and ask for all sorts of things, but you need to have the questions. It's like you say, golden staph, probably very, very similar. So staph and strep are 2 interesting little bacteria, in that they have been in our bodies now for about 80, 90 years, while we have not changed our antibiotics on the planet. So because of that, you can imagine our mums and our grandmas would have had the same antibiotics that we have. So therefore, the gut bugs we have are the hardiest gut bugs, because they have survived medications, they've survived stress, they've survived lots of drugs, antibiotics, vaccinations, all sorts of things. So the craziness, Deb, around full moon. What did you, sorry.
No, I heard you say, sorry, I heard you say something about oregano, and then I didn't actually catch. I obviously know about the, shall we say, wormwood tea, etc.
Yes.
Oh, if you mean as in essential oils, yeah, that's great. I just wondered, I thought there was something I'd missed. Sorry.
Oh no, there's
I
all
was just-
sorts of things.
I was trying to scribble it down. Yeah, I
no,
was trying to
that's
scribble it
cool.
down
There's
quickly.
herbs like black walnut, walnut, wormwood, powder yarko, cat's claw.
Even garlic as well.
Garlic is awesome. Onion is awesome, unless you've got FODMAPs issues, in which case they'll make you fart like troopers. Yeah, there's lots of really good herbs that are anti-parasitic. Artemisia. And Artemisia is one of the things, it's one of the things that's actually helping to break down some of the vaccine toxins that are causing damage. So which is great, because there's it's a bit of a challenge out there at the moment. Yeah, Kim? Oh, sorry, Han, can't hear you.
Oh, unmute. Okay. Now, do antimicrobials, or your herbs, do they work very similar to antibiotics? In other words, they can destroy your microbiome if you take too many?
It's always good to use the probiotics afterwards. So I had a lady in today and she's doing 3 days on killing things off and then 4 days on rebooting. So that's sort of what we're doing for her, because her body, and don't forget there's that huge gut-brain connection as well. So when we're wearing things down in the gut, that can make our brain feel foggy too. Huge gut-brain connection. So anything we do that helps to repair our gut will help to repair the brain as well. But I always muscle test up the number, but as a very general rule of thumb, you want about 3 and 4 days. Say 3 days of killing, 4 days of boosting. Or with that full moon, you can do that week-long thing if you're nice and hardy, but then get into some probiotics afterwards, because you're creating space. Don't forget that there's this whole space thing going on in the body. If you create space but don't fill it with something, guess what's going to fill up in there? Candida, bacteria, SIBO, fungus.
Yeah.
So we've got to get in there and boost the good guys while there's space.
Do you think a normal, just yogurt with probiotics is enough? Or do you think it needs to be really strong, high levels of probiotics after doing a parasite cleanse?
A really good one, absolutely. I sort of, because there are some great ones out there. A lot of them, of course, if they've been heated, it destroys the probiotics by the time we're eating them. So it's just one of those things, if you've got to check the live amounts. There are some good foods that really help to increase that as well. So get those good bacteria going. They did a study on an Italian, it was, they looked at the number of strains in the microbiome of people who were eating a very standard American diet. And there was a really small number. I can't remember. But then they put them onto that Italian, what's the name of that Italian diet everyone talks about? The one with
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So, and then they put them on that, including the red wine, lots of strains of, they did the pasta as well. But by the end, they quadrupled the amount of microbiome strains within 3 weeks. So diet is massive, and everything we are doing is destroying our microbiome these days. We drink water with fluoride and chlorine in it. Those are antibiotics. So if we are drinking water out of the tap with fluoride in and taking antibiotics, it's you're just giving the money to the people. I had Matteo Taylor on my podcast on the weekend, and he worked for the group that Erin Brockovich helped take down, PG&E. And they're owned by the Rothschilds, just for fun. And apparently on average, they have at least 10 lawsuits going at a time, because they're so much fun. They love us all so much, and they want us all to thrive in this world. But he was not at all surprised when he started checking water supplies for toxins and finding massive amounts of things years ago when he was working to try to help them out. So it's Yeah, Eve said, how much are we absorbing from the sprays in the skies? I had a lady in today and I was doing bioresonance, and hers was like a register for chemtrails. It was silver, aluminium, barium. Like it was the top, you know, it was just the top 4 things. I said, sorry, hun, I know it's great to go outside. I don't know what to recommend to people anymore. Here in Australia, we've approved this thing for cholera, I think, which is a combination, you know, so it's aerially sprayed. It's a combination of West Nile virus with Epstein-Barr virus wrapped up in a little thing that they approved in, I don't know, 2019, 2020, something like that. And those 2 bugs show up constantly with the bioresonance. And I can be out in the pool for an hour and I'll just be looking up going, oh, well, we'll see what my bioresonance is saying tonight. And sure enough, it'll be in there. Like, it doesn't take long. It's just awful. But really, these days, we need to get the body to recognize them. And that's where kinesiology comes in. Like you said earlier on, Eve, if your body isn't recognizing something, it's not going to help you get rid of them. You know, so our bodies have to recognize substances. So there's a little process called energy mismatch, which we'll be doing this week, which is really cool. So I'll show you the little guidelines for that, because I love the energy mismatch to stuff to just get the body recognizing things. So I'll show us how to do it on ourselves later on in the week. Wine and cheese, yeah. Yeah, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, thanks, Drew. Yeah, so the terrain theory about 15 years ago in natural therapies, we started talking about the terrain theory versus germ theory. So medically, they're still using the germ theory because that makes them money. So this is the whole thing about the Rockefeller system. If they can make everyone believe that a germ causes everything, then they can create a patented drug for everything, and they can get us on drugs for the rest of our lives. And you do not want to see the list of things the World Health Organization has up their sleeve for us over the next 10 years. Sorry, Ange, I'm getting political. It just drives me nuts. You just look at these big players around the world and it's really quite phenomenal. So the more we can do to get our bodies and those people we love around us, you know, recognizing lots and lots of different things, finding the way to get into hierarchies of things, you know, which is another one of the keys with kinesiology that we can do. So that's about having really good charts. It's about having good lists, you know, so, okay, do I need to go here, 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 or here? Okay, well, let's start here and work from there. So that's part of how to get the most out of kinesiology is knowing what you're muscle testing from first. But once you get your brain up and running, it's sort of funny. There's a little gyrus in there called the anterior cingulate gyrus. And the anterior cingulate gyrus, there's like a 6-second loop in the brain, and nothing's 6 seconds in the brain. So it's really ridiculous that this little 6-second loop sits underneath the little logical and creative hemispheres. And what it's doing when we have a thought that we can't get rid of, there's just like a little worm, you know, nutting away in our brain, and we can't get rid of it. It's waiting for a logical and creative solution to whatever's been going on. So when we've got that earworm going on in there and we can't get rid of it, it's because our anterior cingulate gyrus is going, give me some logic and creativity. Give me another thought process. Give me something where I'm not under duress. Because if our brain is locked into survival, then it's not going to believe that you've made a logical, creative decision. It's going to assume that you've made a decision under duress that is not for the best of your health and well-being. So therefore, even when you're muscle testing, it's sort of, that would be an interesting thing to ask your body when you're getting weird answers, you know, when you're muscle testing and not quite getting the answers you're thinking. Is it because you want answer A, B, C, D, E for a start? I remember I was out walking with my cousin years and years ago, and she wanted a boy at the time. She already had one, she wanted another one. So she was asking me, firstly, was she pregnant? And secondly, was it a girl or a boy? But of course, I'm going to say muscle testing is not about, it's not fortune telling. It's not like that. But she wanted it so much. She wanted it so much that every time we muscle tested up, it said yes and yes. And it was always lying. And I kept saying to her, Chewy, we can't do this. This is not what kinesiology is for. But you can't tell some people, you know, you just have to slap it out of them. But it was very interesting because you'd go, no, can't do that, can't do that. So, yeah, so the emotional stress, I'll sort of, one of my little funny stories is that I had a client years ago who was living with her mother-in-law. And so she would walk around the house going, serenity now, serenity now, serenity now. So she would run the central meridian, which runs from here to here, and it goes in an upwards direction. So that feeds the conscious brain. So she would have a hand on her forehead and she'd just walk around the house going, serenity now, serenity now. And I had another client, Trish, and she was in a position where she was in charge of about 12 girls. She worked for Telecom or Telstra or, you know, some telecommunications company, and they were always really stressed and really overworked, and she was trying really hard to she was working really hard to keep the girls balanced. So if they walked into her office and they wanted to complain to her, they had to put their hand on their forehead and run their central meridian while they walked into her office to see her. And she said it's amazing how it calmed things down and got the brains working better so that they could actually be part of the solution with whatever was going on in their heads. Oh, you little putty cat, Anna. Yeah. So any last questions on anything going on that we've chatted about tonight before we kick along? I know it's getting late for some of you.
Madonna, with that hand testing, how firm do you hold your fingers together? Like, because obviously you're kind of stressing the muscles a bit, right? If you're trying to
I
hold it.
definitely stress my muscles. Yeah, I don't do it as gently as Deb does.
So you hold it quite firm?
I hold mine as firm as anything. So that I am stressing all of that out to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I think I do that because I suppose I try not to make it spiritual, or I try not to make it, anyway, I suppose I try to make it 100% purely physical. Yeah. Yeah. So tomorrow night, we're going to have another couple of things, get into some brain buttons and things like that, and we'll have a chat about that and more of the brain sort of stuff. I obviously quite love the brain stuff. And I think the more we do to empower, and I'm going to do the share the morrow exercise tomorrow if people haven't seen that before, and sort of chat about that and how it can impact on people's worlds around them as well, because we need our brains up and running. So much is putting us into survival at the moment. We need to be able to calm people's brains down. We need to be able to calm down our own brains, because I have a feeling that things aren't going to get easier over the next little while. I just have a feeling about that.
Based on the last 3 years, I think that's probably quite a rational assumption at this point.
Yes. And I was out the other night, and there's probably Labor voters here, and that's fine here in Australia, but our whole country here, for those who don't live here, is now all Labor. We're 100% Labor. And most people who vote Labor probably think that it's quite centre left at the moment, but Labor has gone so far left that it's, you know, we're just about in China. So it's the most bizarre thing at the moment, watching what people think saved their lives in the last 3 years. Okay, still we haven't learnt about our immune system. We still haven't learnt about our ability to heal. We haven't learnt about our ability to detox. How many 5G towers are there near you? One of my clients bought a plot of land about an hour and a half outside of Brisbane. She bought it up on a mountain, beautiful trees everywhere. She's out wandering through the bush one day, and there's a huge 5G tower in the middle of the bush.
Yeah, they've put it up near a lot of eco parks as well, and they're near a lot of hospitals, a lot of schools, shopping centres, everywhere. And they actually paint some of them so that they look like a tree, or they look like part of the roof, so you don't even know that it's there. That's how deceptive it is. Firstly, most people don't recognize them because they don't even know what they are. But even when you do know what they are, they've tried to hide quite a few of them as well to make it look like they're not there.
Yes. And every cell in our body absorbs the radiation from those. So when we're feeling tired, when we're not sleeping well, when we are feeling fatigued, when our joints are aching, all of that can be radiation toxicity, all of it. Every symptom people have had for the last 3 years can be radiation toxicity. Arthur Furstenberg, who I interviewed, he wrote a book, can't remember what it's called, but basically he looked at and he's a full-blown he's as straight as a die scientist, and he looked at the last 150 years of radiation on the planet and how every time they've increased radio waves for a war or for this or for that, there's been a pandemic, because every time they increase it from radio to 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, there's been illness around. So it's sort of, we need to think bigger than just what people come into us for. We need to think bigger than just the emotional gear, because as you can feel, like the emotions can be linked to parasites, which can be linked to the neurotransmitters being gobbled up in the gut. The parasites can be linked to the full moon. The parasites can be linked with the 5G. So everything's connected to everything. And that's where we need to really start. Yeah, and that's where we really need to start looking big picture and how much can we get in, you know, and that's why I love, you know, sort of a really good chunky session, you know, of kinesiology that has all sorts of components to it. Because like I said, it's an algebraic equation. So whatever you have over here. So if you stack in some structural stuff, if you stack in some emotional stuff and some immune stuff and some brain stuff, and then you do a balance, you're balancing all of that with your balance. So that's the thing about the algebraic equation that I love about kinesiology. And by the end of the week, I'll give you like a little, for those of you who have never done kinesiology, I'll give you a little bit of a thing. If you follow these little guidelines, that will do all of the bits and pieces we've done all week. So that's my intention. Beautiful.
That's great. Thanks, Madonna. That's a lot of
Yes,
a
it
lot of good
is.
info.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome.
I've got to bid you farewell. I'll catch you tomorrow.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for that link, Michelle.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, sleep well, Shelley. Are you going to get back to sleep now?
I am
Yeah.
for a few minutes.
So, what, 5:15 in the morning or something there? Well done.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So
And Jen, what time
I
is
don't
it
have
for
a
you?
client until 1:30 today, so I'm gonna sleep
Wow.
in for a minute.
What-
Yeah, it's the same time here,
Thank you.
Oh, same
5:21
time there.
in the morning.
Wow. And Karen, what time is it there for you?
It's 9:25 in the morning.
Ah, piece of cake.
No,
Woo, piece of cake.
Yeah.
The rest of us are all Aussies. Cool. Well, thank you all so very much. I'll do a
Madonna.
little bit of editing and I'll chuck this up on our
Thank you.
kinesiology Kickstart group.
Much. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Take care, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Everyone.
Night night.
Yeah.
Enjoy your holiday, Sharon. See you tomorrow, Karen.
Well, thank
See
you,
you
Madonna.
tomorrow. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.